Good evening. I call the 2,386th meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. This meeting is being held in person at City Hall and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to City Hall or joining the Zoom webinar. The meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and Comcast cable channel 30 within city limits. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during this meeting. If you would like to address council, you may come to City Hall or participate via Zoom. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by filling out a yellow comment card for those at City Hall or emailing ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov for those on Zoom. When it is time to take public comment, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, and Zoom participant list and chat. We will take comments in the order that they are received and seen. Written comments may be emailed to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. Contamos con servicio de traducción al español cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad para reuniones por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Translation services are also available in other languages. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The City of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Now we'll move to announcements. The city is currently taking input on the draft natural hazard mitigation plan until August 31st. There's a link there that shows you how to find that. This plan is an opportunity for the city to review and consider natural hazards that may affect its residents and businesses. To learn more and participate, visit Engage Milwaukie at engage.milwaukieoregon.gov. Free live concerts in the park continue through August in 2 of Milwaukie neighborhoods. The Llewellyn NDA is usually holding a concert in Ball Michelle Park each Wednesday night, but they're actually not doing it tomorrow. They have postponed that one due to the heat, and it's going to be rescheduled at the end of the, like September 5th, I believe. It's available, is that right? It's available also on their Facebook page. So there won't be a concert tomorrow night, but the rest of the Wednesdays in August, there will be concerts in Ball Michelle Park. And there is pizza for purchase from Hearth and Soul Pizza. The Ardenwald Johnson Creek NDA is holding a concert at Ardenwald Park each Thursday at 7 p.m. And their concerts also include food and beverages for purchase. And as far as I'm aware, they are going forward on Thursday. The temperatures are supposed to be a little bit better by Thursday. Volunteer registration has begun for the annual Johnson Creek Watershed Cleanup, which is this Sunday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Volunteers get into the creek to take out trash. Since 2007, volunteers have pulled over 70 tons of trash from the water. You also get a free lunch and a free t-shirt, which they have a special t-shirt done every year for this cleanup. And I do know someone who's leading the cleanup in our North Industrial area off of McBroad Street, and they still have slots there. So you can go to the Johnson Creek website and sign up. The Planning Commission will review the development plans for Balfour and Bowman Bray Parks on Tuesday, August 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Visit the city website to find the agenda and information about how to join or watch the meeting. For more information about each of these events and others, please visit the city's homepage at milwaukieoregon.gov or call 503-786-7555.
Mayor Beatty, if I might add an event that wasn't mentioned here, but the first Friday of September, on September 1st, the city is partnering with the Milwaukie Historical Society to celebrate and commemorate and remember historic City Hall. So just remind folks from 5 to 8 p.m., city staff will be here and opening the building and with Greg and the Historical Society to let folks in one more time as it is in its public service form. So.
Yeah, great. That's a good reminder. Yeah, First Fridays often happen before our first meeting, as in this case, so it's great. Good reminder. And then First Friday in October will be a chance to visit the new City Hall. Is that correct?
That's right. We're planning a great grand celebration to officially and I think ceremoniously lock historic City Hall and lower the flags and then march up Main Street to New City Hall and raise the flags and unveil the plaque and do low light refreshments. So more to come on that front. But yes, mark the next 2 first Fridays for City Hall related events.
Okay, great, thank you. Community comments. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear your community member comments regarding city business. Before we begin, is there any follow-up from the August 1st community comments, Ms. Ober?
There are. So a couple of things. The first one, hi, Mr. Hemer. Mr. Hemer came to visit us last week, or at the last meeting, to talk about naming the community room after the Hadleys. And I wanted to just give you an update on what city staff has been doing. I also just wanted to thank Greg. I know that he brings a lot of passion to our community. He leads in a way that's authentic and true, and he's trying to make Milwaukie the best Milwaukie it can be. And I see that, and I appreciate it. I also know that one of the things I've learned about our equity work over the last few years is one of the most important parts is intentionality. So not just going fast, but doing what's right with community engagement, with people at the table participating in that process and making sure that everybody has a voice in that process, especially in something like this where it's caused harm historically. So what we have been proposing for the last several months is that when we come before council in September, we are actually bringing forward both the equity study and this concept of whether or not you want to do a naming process where we would create a policy. You all could talk about the things that should go into that policy. And then we would move forward. Gabriella started yesterday. We're really excited to have her on our staff. So she's our new equity program coordinator. I talked to her this morning just to make sure that this was something that she felt like she could do in the workflow if you all decided that was something you wanted, and she said absolutely, and this is a big part of equity work right now in the United States is having this discussion as a community. So that is currently the proposal that staff is making. If you want to have any discussion about that with me right now, we can, or if you want me, otherwise I'm planning on bringing this up at our next meeting.
At September, the first meeting in September,
Yeah.
not the second. Okay.
Sound good?
Anybody have any questions or comments about that, or is that everybody happy to see it come forward in September?
If you all do decide that you want the naming process to happen out of that meeting, I would ask that you just come prepared with any guardrails or any boundaries that you'd like to make sure that she has in advance. One of the more detrimental things could be if somebody starts a process and we go through a whole community discussion and it doesn't meet the boundaries that you all need it to. So just think about that. I know that I will send out some links that talk about naming policies in other communities, so you will have some opportunity. I know the mayor has sent some stuff in the past. This is not a decision-making discussion. It is the start of a process, so we just want to make sure we're meeting your expectations as we go through that process.
Great.
Sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
The second piece is that we had an individual by the name of Mr. Moen stop by, and he talked about the city's environmental related policies and suggested that the city had levied excessive fines on climate related code violations. So it really was just a policy discussion with you all. So I have not come prepared with anything. They didn't ask for anything other than for you to hear him. But if you had anything you wanted in addition from me or from staff, please let me know.
Did anyone have any requests on that? No.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. For those in person, so the one yellow card I have is for a later agenda item. This is the time for people who want to discuss, who want to address something that is not on the agenda later. So for those in person who wish to speak, please submit a yellow comment card found on the table just outside the door. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand reaction to alert staff that you wish to speak. Mr. Stauffer, do we have anyone? I'm not seeing anyone in the room who's seeking to speak at this point.
I have an additional comment card for the later
For the
item.
hearing, okay.
And I see no one on Zoom, Mayor Beatty, and I see no other comment cards in the
Okay,
audience.
so I will forego reading that long script since nobody's here to testify on that part, and we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes minutes of the City Council July 18th, 2023 work session and July 18th, 2023 regular session, and a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between the state and city related to the Monroe Street Greenway. Does any member of council wish to remove a consent agenda item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve consent agenda as presented.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, please say no. None heard. The consent agenda is passed unanimously. Okay, now we'll move on to parks governance.
Thank you.
Yes?
So we have submitted, thank you, Emma, a staff report for this week talking about our parks project. And the discussion has been whether or not the city wants to continue to be a member and participant in NCPRD, or whether or not the city would like to create its own parks department. The dialogue has happened in a number of different staff reports and staff dialogues with you all, and we haven't provided an update recently to the council or given council a chance to talk in a public setting around this. So we wanted to just create a space for you all to talk about anything that you deem appropriate around this parks discussion. So that's all I have today. I can answer questions. Emma's also here. She's been reading up on all of our parks work over the last couple of months. And of course, Justin is here. So if there's something we can help with, let us know. But otherwise, we'll hand it off to you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to set a little bit of a context. It's been about 15 months since the prior city council started the conversation about leaving the NCPRD. I really want to thank Emma and Anne for their 2 pieces in our staff report, which really give a lot of the history. I mean, the history's even more than what's there, but those are the main points of the history, from the last several years. Milwaukie Bay Park has been stalled since late 2020. Just today, council got an email from somebody asking when it's going to be built so that there's a splash pad for kids to play on these hot days. We do have an appeal pending. That's a matter of public record, but I will count on the city attorney to stop me if I overstep beyond saying that we do have an appeal pending of the action to clarify the method for leaving the district. So I do think there's some misunderstanding that the appeal is the movement, the action to leave the district. It's asking the court for a clarification. Correct. Okay. And we do just, we now have an agreement by the chair of the county commission, who is also the chair of the board of NCPRD, to start some discussions to see if there's a path forward together, or just what all the issues are. So if we can find common ground, I guess I would put it that way. So that's kind of where we are. We will have 2 counselors engage with 2 county commissioners to, have those conversations. Other things that people want to say?
I just want to say thank you for the packet. I think everything that we've talked about is in that packet, and if folks need some clarification to go through that packet, Milwaukie deserves to have amenities in our parks, and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, the subject matter and the dedication that you all put into putting all of that information in the packet, I really appreciate. So that's what I have to say.
Great.
I'd like to add my thanks. The summary is wonderful, and if you haven't been following along at home, it's a really good, synopsis of the journey that we've taken. It's complicated, and we're trying to work through that complication, as Anne mentioned, and the mayor mentioned. So I think, I'll just lastly double down on our council president's remarks about what Milwaukie deserves. And we deserve to have quality parks that are maintained, that have amenities for all of our residents. And the council is committed to having those conversations about what it means for our future. So I think this is a good update point for residents. And I hope that there will be more information coming soon. Sometimes that stuff happens behind the scenes, but I'm glad that we brought it forth today for an update and summary. So that's what I have to add.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to raise or talk about? Okay. So I don't know exactly where we go from here. I mean, this was to give the public an update. So people now know, we're still in court, and we are hopefully starting to have conversations with the county.
Well, and we will probably put something on like this every quarter, just to make sure that there's a chance for you all to give this kind of update or any kind of update that you feel is appropriate at the time to the public. And I'll put one on for probably November or December if that works. Perfect. Thanks.
So, we've heard this before, thank you for all the good work. It's a lot for people to absorb. I mean, it's long and it's complicated, as Councilor Stavengard mentioned and everything like that. So I guess, the message that I would want people to take is there is still work going on. There's not a lot of news, There's not a lot of new development, but we hope that, as a result of the appeal and as a result of the ongoing negotiations, we can start to have real movement in some direction that will get us the parks that we deserve. And so I would ask people to be patient, because this is going to take a while. And, work is ongoing. Yeah.
Thank you. Any last words? No? Okay. Well, I guess we will close that item out, unless you had anything else, Ms. Ober?
I do not.
Okay. So the next item is a payment authorization for non-contracted slurry seal improvements. And our finance director and community development director are going to talk to us about that.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Joseph Brilio, Community Development Director. I'm here with my colleague, Toby LaFrance, our Finance Director. We are sitting before you with a bit of an odd and unusual request, and that request is to authorize payment for all intents and purposes a project that is complete. A couple weeks ago, Mr. LaFrance and I learned that the Slurry Seal project went forward without a contract. Everything else occurred in the proper manner. It was the actual contracting and the finished product started off good, then it ended poorly. Why that happened, you might ask? That would be a great question. It's in the staff report, detailed out a little bit more, but in my summation and just for you all right now tonight, I would say a combination of a few things. One being some staff transitions that occurred. These aren't excuses, by the way. These are just context. Staff transitions that occurred. Project manager who was inexperienced and didn't have the support or supervision really required to do a job that would lead to success. And lastly, I would say assuming some details rather than confirming details. And so a combination of all those things led to this failure. Now, a few weeks ago, or actually a few months now, I should say, this council received a memo from our city engineer about a violation that occurred on the Home and Wood project for authorizing a change order that went above and beyond what you all authorized. The project cost ultimately at the final will be below that threshold. However, the action itself was a violation. That's why we brought it to your attention. I bring that up tonight because that moment is when we changed a couple of different things in how our roles and responsibilities on the community development side and the engineering side. It was at that juncture that we actually removed all contract, all IGAs, all invoicing issues from the city engineer and moved it to the assistant city engineer, Jen Garbely. And for those that may or may not know, Jen Garbely is, besides Kelly Tucker, probably the most knowledgeable and competent person when it comes to contract management and project fulfillment. So we did that because we knew that would create a place that would control, a centralized place for all contracts flowing through engineering with the person that we thought would give us the best amount of success. If that happened in January or February, I don't believe we would be sitting before you tonight. That happened just a few months ago, which occurred at the same time this project was already moving forward. So it was kind of happening before we could catch it, so to speak. I do believe that action will assure future success. I think how we've organized it was the right move as of right now, from a staff perspective. And I would also just state this as well, just for the good of the group, is that incidentally, our city engineer just last week notified us that he'll be retiring as of September 8th. So that transition to our assistant city engineer is becoming even more important at this time. So that's why we're here tonight, and I'm going to let Mr. LaFrance speak a little bit more to the finance implications and things I missed.
Thank you, Joseph. So, needless to say, organizationally, we take this very seriously. As the director who is in charge of the contracting process for the city, this is not something that I want to see happening. And as well as some of the corrective actions that Joseph was talking about in terms of changes that he's made within the engineering side, one of the things we recognized even with the first incident that Joseph mentioned, and this just reinforces, is that we will be going about doing organizational training on purchasing and contracting rules for all staff within the city. It's something that frankly is overdue and something that we need to take care of, and we hope will be a further preventative control in this process. Once we found out, it was brought to my attention and to Joseph's attention. I think we've done a good job of taking and notifying the correct people that this event happened. It is a serious event, and what I've tried to communicate within the organization is it's events like this that can lead to a negative finding within your audit. So, a negative finding within your audit can lead to what's termed a qualified opinion, not an unqualified, but a qualified opinion, which would be a negative audit. So essentially no longer a clean audit within the annual comprehensive financial report. You get one of those, it gets reviewed by our bond rating agencies, and potentially the city could have a decrease in our bond rating. Hopefully that will not happen in this case. And the reason I'm hopeful for that is that we were the ones who detected the event. And in fact, we recently had our audit committee. Our audit committee is one of the groups that we've informed, as well as our auditors, about this event. Our auditor pointed out to the audit committee that while this is a serious event, and it's unfortunate that it happened, because we've got a process in place where this shouldn't happen, either through the systems or through our procedures that our people are supposed to follow. We also have controls that are detective, and our detective controls found this before our auditors or anyone else within the community found it. So that's if there's a silver lining in any of this, is that we did discover that our detective controls worked. So I'm hopeful that this will not result in a poor audit. We don't want that to happen. It's very much about the trust of this community in our ability to manage the finances of the city. And that's something that's very important to us. So, with that, I'll see if there's anything else that Joseph wants to add at this point. And we're available for questions. And again, what we're looking for tonight is approval of the resolution so that ultimately we can pay the, I was going to say the contractor, but we can pay the Black Line, the company that provided the service to the community of doing the Slurry Seal project.
Any questions? We usually, go ahead, okay.
Yeah, just going back to the audit issue, I mean, because this is going to be the second error that we've had, right? Because we received a letter before. Is this going to result in another letter from the Secretary of State?
Well, we've written a letter to our auditors that outlined both of these situations so that they're aware of them.
Okay.
And in terms of another letter to council, that letter to council was to make sure in a very transparent way we let council know about the violation. What we're doing tonight, the resolution that's before you tonight, is our very transparent way of showing this second violation and how we are taking care of it moving forward.
And just for clarification and for the public to know, because the contract is a pretty important step. How did we get the work started with? Because it just says mistakes were made, but how did we?
Yeah.
The contract seems like it's pretty big. How
Right.
did we miss that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's the one that we've been asking ourselves. This is literally the first time in my professional experience that a project of this nature has ever happened without a contract. I think that's probably true of everyone in this room. So this is a very unique place to be in, and one that I find truly embarrassing as a professional in city government. And I can only make my assessment is that we did a bid to get economies of scale. So we did a joint bid with a bunch of other cities, about 5 other cities in the metro, to get economies of scale and get better deal for a slurry seal project. Great idea. We did all the proper steps at the beginning, but in that there was the assumption that the lead agency, which was Hillsborough in this project, was taking care of all of the contract work. And that was partly due to the unfamiliarity and the inexperience of our project manager, just not understanding completely. So they assumed that there was a contract that another city did, which to me still would be like, it's another city. So they're still us. That's about as good of an answer as I can give you, Counselor, unfortunately. Unless
Well,
there's
I
more
appreciate it.
from-
I haven't lost any faith in you guys and what you guys do for, I just, public needs to know that you guys do wear a lot of hats, a lot of different hats. So, and just like everywhere else, we're understaffed. And these are important issues, but it doesn't, like, I don't see you guys any differently. I know you guys are doing a great job, so I appreciate your honesty and getting this before it got worse or before a letter happened.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No?
I have a little statement I want to read to you guys, okay? I appreciate the transparency and thoroughness of the report. It's clear the city's taken responsibility for the oversight and handling this project and addressing it head-on. Mistakes can happen, and what truly matters is how they are rectified and prevented in the future. The steps taken to ensure this doesn't occur again are commendable. The commitment to providing detailed procurement training to all staff involved in city projects and implementation of a more structured process and managing engineering contracts are positive measures. It's reassuring to see the dedication to learning from this experience and making the necessary changes to prevent similar issues in the future. The acknowledgement of errors as well as the plans for improvement demonstrate a strong sense of accountability within the city's management, and overall it reflects the responsible approach of addressing challenges and improving processes for the betterment of the community. So thank you. Mistakes happen. That's basically, and you learn from them, so thanks.
Council President?
Well said, Council President. I'll just say ditto. Very well said. Yeah, I appreciate your coming forward as soon as you knew this problem had engendered. And I will say, before I knew about this problem, I had heard lots of positive things about the slurry ceiling in the Linwood neighborhood. So,
You're good.
so we're glad it went forward. Any other comments?
Comments. I don't have questions. The reporting in the packet was thorough. Excuse me. I think mistakes do happen, although this is a pretty disappointing one. It's a really uncomfortable position that both of you are in here, because you have in the path of all the really complicated steps that it takes to develop a procurement process and contracting and everything, you have the really unfortunate last step, which is to report back if something goes wrong. So I appreciate you being here. And one of the most important things I think about contracts is that there's protection in place for the contractor and for the city. So we were really lucky that we made it through this without something happening. And I think the one last thing that might occur is an impact to our bond rating. So that's one of the things that gives me heartburn about this. I'm sure that you've experienced that same heartburn for a longer period of time. So I appreciate you being here and taking this very seriously. And I don't have questions about this, but I just want to say I appreciate how seriously you're taking it.
Thank you. I'll just finally add another just point of interest is that the company Blackline did a good job. They also never asked about a contract, which is also just interesting. Like, it's just things that don't normally happened on this as well.
Did you want to say something, Ms. Ober?
I think I should. This is mine. And I really appreciate the team stepping up. You guys did a great job tonight, and they've taken it very seriously this whole time. I take this really seriously, too, and I just want to make sure you all know that, and you all know, that this is, it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing for all of us, I think. So I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the transparency. I appreciate the honest conversation we've been having here tonight. I appreciate the conversations I've had over the last couple weeks with all of you as we've been going through this and learning more. I would love to say it'll never happen again. I can never make that promise. All I can say is that we are putting controls in place to try and minimize the chance that this will ever happen again and that we ever have to come back and have this conversation. So, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. If no one else has further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the resolution acting as the local contract review board, authorizing a payment of $211,665.20 to Blackline, Inc. for street surface maintenance program SSMP slurry seal improvements completed without a contract.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution acting as the local contract review board, authorizing a payment of $211,675.20 to Blackline, Inc. for street service maintenance program slurry seal improvements completed without a contract. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. None heard. It passes unanimously. And before you guys go,
Thank you, Council.
I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to ask, actually, the counselors. I got mail from the Audits Division of the Secretary of State in my mailbox. Did
sounds like a
anybody
Toby
else
question.
get those?
Was this recent mail? Or,
Yes.
Okay.
I think
This
that
was today. I mean, I don't know when it came in, but I saw it today. They're just notices. They're like, some of you are new to your positions, and we're providing this letter to remind you of your responsibilities as a fiduciary of your local government. So I got one as a city councilor or budget committee member, I guess, and I got one for the Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission. So nobody else got
I
it?
haven't checked my box
Yeah,
today.
I would
so-
check my box.
Okay. So if nobody else got them, I mean, it says Board of Directors, Milwaukie Redevelopment Commission, so I think it's probably just one letter. So can I turn these over to you or somebody to like get copies to everybody? Okay, great.
I'd be happy to follow up and see if there's any action you need to take based upon them.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. I mean, they sound like they're telling us where there's some training resources and sort of what the ethics, where to find the ethics rules, et cetera, but yeah,
I'd be
that'd
happy
be great.
to follow up and let council know.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Just,
Yeah.
just the last question. Sorry, did you say, because you brought up the bond rating as well, is this likely to affect our, or not?
I'm
in your
hopeful
opinion?
that it will not. While anything could, I don't think this in and of itself would lead to a poor audit.
Okay.
Okay. However, you never know what an annual audit's going to discover, and we've had clean audits in the past. I hope that we're going to continue to have clean audits. If we have clean audits, this would not impact our bond rating. If this, maybe in conjunction with a couple of other, if our auditors manage to find something, which beyond these contract violations, I don't expect them to find anything major, but if they do, added to this, it could have enough of a cumulative effect that they give a qualified opinion, and we don't want that qualified opinion. So while I'm hopeful and think that this in and of itself won't lead to that qualified opinion, it's still something, it sets us behind in the overall process, and I'm not happy about that. And so I'll keep you apprised as we go along.
Please, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I do just want to call out a big part of government, our responsibility is being honest with our public, as transparent and as honest as we can be. It's something that our staff believe in, it's something I believe in, I think it's something you all believe in. And so the more you can be honest and transparent, the more trust people can have that you're going to tell them when there is a problem, the less likely it is that you have to be told in writing.
Right.
So our goal is always to make sure this is as clear, everything, any problems that happen are as clear and as honest with the community as we possibly can be. And so we're doing that here. It's a preponderance? Yeah, there you go. Of honesty, transparency, and just trust building. That's what we're trying to do. Okay,
Appreciate it.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we're having a little bit of a announcement of agenda order change. Council will now proceed to agenda item 8B to receive a brief update from staff. And then we'll move to 8A, which is the DLC item. Well, maybe after staff remarks on this and a few other things, but okay.
Just so you all know, there was a public noticing kerfuffle. We didn't post the 30-day notice on the city's website for the hearing tonight, so we're punting it into the September 19th meeting, which we already had a placeholder for anyway. So sorry about that. We posted it physically, but it did not get posted on the website. So I'm hoping that we can just move the public hearing to the 19th.
Okay, great. So we noted, our agenda predicted that we wouldn't start the next item until 7:15, and I do think there are probably more people coming. So I'd kind of like to hold the next item and do sort of council reports and other things first, and then we'll start that closer to 7 or whenever we finish the other things. So, I don't know if anybody else have any council reports they want to give?
My vacation was very good. I know I wasn't here for a couple meetings. I made it through customs both times, so that's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any formal meeting reports, but I do have a couple of things I just want to mention. Is that I actually signed up for the Metro 101 session that was given down in Oregon City. And, I kind of know what Metro does, but then I really don't know what they do. And so I just wanted to get smarter. And it was kind of an unusual meeting. They kind of did not more than about 10 or 15 minutes of introductions. And so it wasn't several hours of death by slide. And so it was mostly getting to know the major players in Metro, which I found fascinating, and got a lot more insight into what they're doing. Interestingly, they really had sort of an engagement plan. They made sure that their people were talking to city staff, councilors, mayors, and everything like that. They weren't huddled up in a corner by themselves. And it was interesting. They really wanted to know what was on our mind. And so I thought it was a pretty good engagement process and that kind of thing. And one of the things that the chief operating officer of Metro said is, I would love to come visit your city and walk your streets and hear about what's going on and that kind of thing. So that's something to put in the back of our brain, maybe to invite some of the Metroites down to talk to us or walk around or whatever we think is appropriate. We can just kind of noodle that for a while. And are you going to talk about the visit today?
You go right ahead.
So the Watershed Council got sort of a late heads up that Senator Wyden wanted to come visit Kellogg Dam and talk about the Kellogg project and everything like that. It was very hot today, but we had a little canopy set up over there by Wes, and so I think it was a good opportunity to keep Kellogg in the forefront of the congressional delegation and that kind of thing. He's very interested in what's going on. Realizes that the $15 million NOAA grant is big, but that's not the end of it, and so we put that in his brain that we're looking for additional support to actually complete the project. And it was so interesting. We had people talking about how long that they were have been involved in this, and I thought it was interesting. The representative from NOAA said, I've been interested in this project for a long time, and I actually took my daughter when she was like 4 years old down here to see Kellogg Lake, and she says, now my daughter's starting law school. And so we've made a couple runs at it, but I think we're actually, coming around the clubhouse turn here and that kind of thing. So I just appreciate the senator making time to swing by and see what's going on.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at the forecaster for this, so I don't know when we have an update on Kellogg scheduled, but there's a lot. It does sound like there's a lot going on, and you hear more of it because you go to the Watershed Council meetings. But they're coming down to a final design option on both the bridge and the creek bed, and I think there will be some interesting things. Hopefully, we'll get an update this fall. They are looking at trying to secure the necessary funding by end of 2025 for a 2026 construction start. So, but they hope to have it, sort of shovel ready by the end of this year. Did I understand that? Or by the end of 2024?
2020.
End of 2024, that's right, end of 2024.
Yeah.
So all of that means it's moving and it's awesome. It's one We have a couple more years of duck races left to go before there's no dam for duck races, ducks to race over. All right.
Mayor Beatty?
Others have council reports?
Mayor Beatty, I just wanted to jump in real quick to confirm that Nikiwik and Neil are scheduled for December
December,
to
great,
return to council.
great, perfect, thank you. Anybody else?
Just a quick update on the Housing Advisory Board for Clackamas County. They did not have an August meeting, but are planning to have the September 6th meeting at Hillside.
Oh.
So Joseph and I serve on that board, and since the meeting is here in our dear hometown, then I think that might be of particular interest. So let me know if you have questions or want to sit in on that meeting.
When is that?
It's September 6th,
Okay.
and usually we meet in the afternoon, like around, was it 1 to 3 or 3 to 4? 3 to 4. So I can let you know, I can let everybody know if that timing changes just because of the location. The other update, since Laura's here, I don't know, are you going to update on TSP? I don't want to steal this from you. Okay, good. So the TSP Advisory Committee, Transportation Systems Plan Advisory Committee, is planning to start in October, and it looks like it might be the 19th. So I just emailed you back about that. So excited to start that work and get that moving. And I know that it's connected to a lot of other work that you all are partnering on. So excited for that. C4 meets tomorrow morning, bright and early, 7:30 a.m. Woo! Love that assignment. That's all that I have for today.
Okay. Anything, Councilor Kostrobati? Nope. Okay. I attended the Oregon Mayors Association conference this weekend in Hood River. I mentioned it last night during the budget committee meeting because one of the things I did there was a tour talking about Oregon or Hood River's urban renewal sites, which was very informative and interesting. I will have longer notes that I will share, but there were 3 or 4 key issues that were I would say the hot topics. Oh, well, yeah. So there were 3 or 4 things that were the hot topics, and I would say they were housing, houselessness, and camping ordinances, and Measure 110. There's a fair sentiment out there for trying to repeal Measure 110. There's others who just think it needs, to have an enforcement option kick in at some point and not be sort of the open-ended thing it is now. There was, there were a lot of discussions on all of that. I attended a few seminars, and one that I went and attended was on broadband. Because, we keep hearing there's all this federal money on broadband, and so I wanted to have a better understanding of that. And, it was interesting, and there is just Google National Broadband Map. It comes up, you can put in your own address, you can put in City Hall's address, you can put in anything, and it brings it up, and it has green dots if things have a certain level of service or not, and then, other like dots with a blank hole in the middle if they don't have service or they have lesser service. We're pretty much all green dots in Milwaukie. There aren't very many gaps. What I did take away, I was hopeful that maybe some of this money would be something we could revisit the work that was done a year or 2 ago on on a municipal broadband network. I don't think it's going to be, we're very low down on their totem pole because we have multiple providers. We have a lot of homes connected. So I don't think we're who the broadband money is going to help. And I don't think, at least in this first sort of next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be anything, it's not going to be an option for us. So, I mean, I was at least glad to have that understanding because I had been wondering as I see all the emails about all the money. And yeah, I think those were the main points I wanted to share. I will go through my notes and see what other things might be of interest. But it was a good meeting. There were mayors from all over, and it was very convenient because it was only Hood River. Next year it's in Klamath Falls, so it's a little bit more of a trip. And the League of Oregon Cities Conference this October will be in Eugene. For anybody who does, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but that's a good conference for people to attend if they can come October. All right, I think that's it for me. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I don't know what it is. All right. Well, I guess if no other council reports, anything else from Ms. Ober by way of kind of end council report or
No,
legislative, anything? No?
I think so. The housing piece was our big one that we're working on right now.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, I mean, I can give you one quick one. So we do have as you all know, we hired a behavioral health specialist, almost a year ago now. We are partnering with Love One and with Central City Concern, and they have received funding and staffing to help support our houseless community here in Milwaukie. So we actually have 3 staff people who are now working in Milwaukie to support people in crisis, which is really exciting. They're all doing office hours and support hours over at the library, so you may run into them. That's part of why I'm telling you about them. And there's also going to be an article in the Pilot next month that talks about them, provides photos and a little bit about everyone. So if you see them as a community member, feel free to go up and chat with them. They're really lovely individuals. So the person from Love One, his name is Don. He has a service animal by the name of Rita. She is a delight. She likes me a lot and tackled me in the last hall interaction we had. And then the other person she's amazing and has tons of energy. Her name is Goose, and she represents Central City Concern, and she started just a couple weeks ago. I had a chance to go over and see how things were going today over at the library, and the services and the engagement was just really positive. So I think you're going to enjoy working with these individuals. We'll be coming back here, I think next month, actually, with an update on our behavioral health piece, and we'll be inviting all those individuals to come chat with you and to get to know you. So I'm just really appreciative of Love One and Central City Concern and the county all stepping up to make sure that people here in Milwaukie who are in crisis are getting the services and support they need.
It's so great to see. Yeah. I mean, we got some statistics on some of the placements and things. It's been really, really encouraging. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are those office hours like fixed and ones we can advertise, or?
It will be. So both Don and Goose would like to try and make sure that they have a few weeks in the building just to get a sense for when there's the most demand. But Glenn's over there on Wednesdays. So yes, if you give me a few weeks, we will have those, but we don't today.
Okay. Great. Great. All right. Well, we've almost come to 7, so I guess we'll go ahead and kick off our only remaining item, which is the public hearing on the Design and Landmarks Committee Code Update. And I have to actually read a script here. Okay. The public hearing on the proposed DLC code change is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to hear the staff report, take public comment, deliberate, and consider adopting code changes to retire the DLC. Does any council member wish to announce actual or potential conflicts of interest? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Planning Manager Laura Weigel for the staff report.
All right, thanks everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having us here tonight. It's nice to be inside, actually, on one night in the summer, so that's lucky. That's lucky for the evening. Tonight, we're here to talk about the code amendments that will retire the Design and Landmarks Committee. Just to note, before we get into kind of the details, I just want to talk a little bit about that retiring the DLC does not mean that the city is not going to protect its historic resources or have well-designed buildings in our downtown. We have code that helps us meet these important goals. In fact, the DLC played a critical role in developing the downtown code, and for that, we're very thankful. We understand that there is a desire by some of the community members to have a robust historic resources program, and there may be a time at a future date when that is appropriate. But that at this current moment in time, there are competing goals, such as the Transportation System Plan Update, the Neighborhood Hubs Project, Planning Work Department work around climate change, parks, and continued housing work. As a result, staff would like to walk you through the rationale for this recommendation. Sorry, I just assumed the PowerPoint was going. My fault. I'm just like jumping right into it. Because I'm leaning on Brett, my colleague here, to change the slides. That's on you, Brett.
Way to go, Brad. Yeah. I'm supposed to be in the passenger seat, but it's like we're a right
I just
side.
started driving without asking. Okay.
Get a map here. Okay.
Okay. Very good.
All
Change
right.
the slide. Okay, we're on track. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history of the DLC. The Historic Review Committee / Commission was formed just after the city adopted its historic resources inventory in 1989. The committee was established to oversee the historic resources inventory. In 2000, after the adoption of the Downtown Framework Plan, the Historic Resource Commission was changed to the Design and Landmarks Commission to review specific types of projects in the downtown in addition to historic resource applications. In 2004, the DLC Commission was changed to a committee, making the Planning Commission the decision maker on all historic resource applications and downtown design review applications. And the DLC has reviewed very few applications for either of the historic resources or the downtown design review over many years. In fact, the DLC has reviewed only 10 historic resources applications in 30 years. Since 2004, the DLC has reviewed historic resources applications only as a courtesy. The code has no requirement that the DLC review historic resource applications. The Planning Commission has the authority to review the very infrequent historic applications that come before them. And regarding the downtown design review applications, the DLC has reviewed, on average, much less than one downtown design review application per year. In addition to the infrequent review required by the DLC, the changes the DLC recommended to the Planning Commission have not had substantive impact on any of the designs they reviewed. And even at times, the Planning Commission did not always include the DLC recommendations as they went through the approval process. Outside of the infrequent approval review, application review, the primary focus of the DLC has been on downtown design review, not historic resources. The code amendments recently adopted for downtown design review were, in some ways, the result of 20 years of discussion about development in the downtown. The committee spent years talking about Milwaukie character and how to apply that to downtown development. The result is the recently adopted code that drives the design of downtown buildings, and it's used by planning staff and the Planning Commission to evaluate proposals. The DLC has not actually been actively involved in historic resource work in many years. So let's talk about the rationale for retiring the DLC. Because the code is so strong after many years of work, the Planning Commission is well equipped to review the very infrequent downtown design review applications. The code also outlines the review process for historic resources. The Planning Commission is also well equipped to review those applications. The comprehensive plan goal and policies around historic resources call for the protection of those resources. The city does indeed protect those 16 properties that are identified as significant resources. That said, current historic resources are defined by the state and the federal government. Those definitions may be antiquated as to what constitutes a historic resource in this day and age. The community may need to have a larger conversation about what should be deemed a historic resource before identifying new ones. Updating the historic resources inventory is on the planning department's work plan after several other priorities. Additionally, taking into consideration the larger community conversation about how historic resources are defined, the DLC may not ultimately be the appropriate group to shepherd that conversation, or they may be, but that will require a larger conversation. With no current projects for the DLC, there is very little need for them to meet, which can lead to a dissatisfying volunteer experience. Without the DLC, the city still maintains its existing historic resources inventory, of which there, again, are 16 properties that are significant that are protected by the code. We do protect those properties, and those protections will not go away. The Planning Commission will review the historic resource and downtown design review applications the same way the DLC would by following the criteria in the municipal code. Future PC recruitment can include design and historic resource professionals if possible and desirable. The historic resource inventory and approach are on the planning department work plan in several years. And at that time, the city would likely appoint an advisory committee to assist with that work, much as we've done and are doing currently with the transportation system plan, as well as we did with the comprehensive plan and what we just did with the housing plan. So we recruit folks that are specific to a specific project at a moment in time. We have received testimony opposing retiring the DLC. We received 2 letters from the Milwaukie Historical Society opposing the code amendments, 1 letter from the PC hearing and 1 letter from tonight. We also, in total, from both the PC hearing and the hearing tonight, had 16 other folks send in opposition testimony, primarily in support of the letters of the Milwaukie Historical Society. All of the testimony received is regarding the desire to keep the DLC and to expand the level of activity around historic resources beyond what the group has been doing for almost 20 years. Currently, the only historic resource work the committee is engaged in is the historic resource application review, which is very infrequent. Neither the comprehensive plan nor current code designates the DLC as the body of work to oversee the historic resource work in the city. That is part of the Planning Commission's charge. The historic resource inventory, as well as the current code, require the city to protect historic resources in the city. This does not go away without the DLC. The comprehensive plan has over 400 goals and policies, with only 11 of them relating to historic resources. Each of these 400 goals and policies require a different level of focus and resources at different times. The comprehensive plan is a 20-year plan. It is not possible to tackle all of that work at the same time. Currently, City Council goals, climate change, and parks, as well as the city's ongoing housing work, are the focus of the Planning Department upcoming work, as well as the Transportation System Plan and neighborhood hubs. Creating a new historic resources plan, including updating the historic resources inventory, as well as having a conversation about how that inventory may look different than our current inventory, is a conversation that would need to occur in lieu of other work. So taking into consideration what's been outlined this evening, staff still recommends adopting the code amendments that retire the DLC. And with that, I will outline your decision-making options for the evening. 1 is approve the proposed amendments as presented with the recommended findings in support of approval. 2, approve the proposed amendments with revisions, revising the recommended findings as needed. 3, continue the hearing. 4, deny the proposed amendments. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
So we'll start with questions from Councilor Stavanger.
Actually, could you come back to me?
Sure.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Councilor Kosher-Byer, do you
yes.
have any questions?
From one of the letters from well, actually, I believe it was from Greg Hemer, the letter we received about SHPO.
Mm-hmm.
Have we looked into any of that? I have some of that stuff up here. did we find out if, I mean, I don't think that we're a CLG.
We're not a CLG. We could be a CLG if we decided that we wanted to get that designation. That would require we could get the designation, but then that would open up kind of this opportunity for grant funding, which would also require us to develop a grant program and work with the DLC to develop a grant program, to decide what it is that we would want the grant program to be. And really, it would require it would require a whole work plan around the DLC in order to build out that committee and build out a work plan. It's possible, yes. The question on the table is whether or not we do that now or we save that for a time in the future after we have been working on the work that we're doing now and have slated to do that are more related to council goals.
And this isn't something that the DLC can take on, right? I mean,
The staff is required to manage the DLC, so we can't really have the DLC going off and having their own meetings and taking their own
no, right,
minutes.
but like,
Yeah.
the work being done, like this, I get staff manages the meetings, but the work that's being done within those meetings is done by members of the DLC, correct?
Well,
Like,
the
would they
staff has
take-
to manage the work itself and the program for how the work gets done, and then providing context and a work plan that they follow, because we would still need to have meetings to meet with them to do the work in the work plan. Yes, could they help with that? But staff still has to manage it.
So if the DLC became, like that was their focus, right? What would the difference be from them being now tasked with that or them tasked with another project? Like I'm just trying to think of, instead of getting rid of it, you morph it into something that does more of what is listed here, because there's a lot of grant opportunities for a lot of businesses and downtown and things that we're missing. And I feel like instead of getting rid of it, could we potentially change what they focus on? And then would that constitute a similar workload as if they were just the DLC working on an existing project review?
Well, I don't know that we're missing out on opportunities for grant funding for downtown programs and economic development programs.
But if we're not a CLG, how are we able to get some of these grants?
Because those CLG funds are specific to historic preservation. And historic preservation is a very small bit of economic development and the downtown generally, and then also the city at large. And part of what we're working on right now through the Hubs project is looking at economic development opportunities for not only those neighborhood hubs, but also thinking about, well, we haven't been doing anything on a larger scale. So say we wanted to develop a storefront program that came out of the Hubs work. We don't believe we would be limiting those funds to only businesses in the hubs. It might be a larger program. So we do think that there is the possibility of doing some economic development work on a very small scale through the neighborhood hubs program. And that's something that we're going to be coming back and talking to you all about here pretty soon, because we've been doing a lot of outreach to the community.
Thank you.
Counselor Massey, any
have no
questions? Council President?
I don't have any questions.
Counselor Stavanger?
Just one quick question, hopefully it's just a clarification. So one of the alternatives is that we would have this as an ad hoc kind of, it would be, it could be an ad hoc committee, it could be a task force, it could be something that activates when there is an item that is needed to be reviewed that's specific to the DLC's work. My question is, what sort of recruitment cycle would we need to be on? Would folks be recruited to be kind of in waiting for an ad hoc committee meeting, or would the group be activated and then a recruitment would occur?
So we have the DLC now, and it is an existing group, right? So we would keep that group on an ad hoc. If you're
Okay.
talking about looking at the reviewing historic resources and downtown design review applications, we would keep that current group, assuming they would all be interested in continuing to stay on, knowing that they are an ad hoc group. And so we would have that, and then we would go through, in the spring, when we go through the whole board's recruitment process, we would put out a call for new DLC members, and at that time, if people were stepping down, then we would recruit for folks, and we would just say, this is an ad hoc committee that might meet once or twice a year to review applications.
Okay.
We could do that.
Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Is that it?
Yes. Thank you.
Council President?
Would that require more staff time? Like, what would that look
we
like?
could keep an ad hoc committee to meet once or twice a year. The only caveat to that, and it wouldn't require more staff time, the only caveat to that is that there's just kind of inconsistency in a group dynamic, and that people are just kind of on call, but they don't have any real context for what they're doing because they're not involved in the downtown design review process or historic resource work. So it'd kind of be this on-call, hey, come in, and we're gonna have to teach you how to review these applications. So that's a little bit more work because they don't know how to review them if they're not thinking about it on a regular basis. So we'd have to call them in, probably teach them a little bit about how to review it, and then have them review it. So it would, there's not a cohesiveness there. People might lose interest. We've had problems in the past retaining a quorum with the group because it's kind of been sporadic. So there's just some caveats to that.
Yeah. Yeah, like with the CAUB, right? We can't keep folks there. What about finding a way to blend them in with the Planning Commission? Is that-
Well, the planning commission
That
already
does
is the
this,
ultimate
yeah.
decision maker, so they just make recommendations to the planning commission. And the planning commission already follows the exact same code that the DLC is using to review the applications.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? You outlined the correspondence we received, which trickled in some more today. So that number she gave was the count as of, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed code changes? And I know we have 3 people who do. The council will now take public testimony on the proposed code changes. I will recognize speakers and any questions should be addressed through me. When you begin to speak, state your name and city of residence for the record. For those in person who wish to speak, please submit a yellow comment card found on the table just outside the door. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise hand reaction to alert staff that you wish to speak, and when instructed to begin, click the microphone option to unmute yourself. If you are calling through Zoom and would like to make a comment, dial *9 to raise your hand. You may also submit a comment via email to ocr@milwaukeeoregon.gov. Presentation times for all speakers will be limited. Representatives of groups will be limited to 10 minutes. Individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. Please confine your remarks to the proposed action, avoid repetition and irrelevant information. And so I know in this case we have 2, in terms of the yellow cards, I don't know who might be online. Do we have people online wanting to speak?
There's no one on Zoom, Mayor Beatty, and
Okay.
I don't see any emails in the OCR.
Okay, great. So in this case, I know we have 2 representatives of groups, I believe, and 1 individual, but I'm going to take them in the order in which they came in. So I'm going to say, call up Steve Bennett from the Milwaukie Historical Society. And you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. I'm Steve Bennett, President in Milwaukie Historical Society. I live here in Milwaukie. And as I think has already been noted, we oppose doing away with the DLC. We did prepare a letter that was sent to the Planning Commission, and a copy of, a revised copy of that was submitted here to you as well. The letter that was sent to the Planning Commission had more details, especially regarding the comprehensive plan. So that was not reiterated in what you had. I don't want to simply read the letter to you. I think you've read it yourself. I did want to just make a couple of comments. We offer a rationale for keeping the DLC based on the goal 2 in the comprehensive plan. There were a number of items that we felt the DLC was uniquely qualified to handle, and that plan was supported by that. We also believe that, as was discussed, from a financial point of view, doing away with the DLC limits the options that you have, the opportunities of the city to become a certified local government. You have to have a DLC in order to do that. It doesn't mean that you couldn't reinstate it, but it would take more time and lengthen that process. So for those two reasons, we feel like keeping the DLC is an important step for the city and could increase the chances for financial gain, for helping with the maintaining and managing and understanding the historic resources that we have in the city. So finally, in our letter, we offered a suggestion for how to leverage the resources that they have. And that is to help us on a volunteer basis, the Historical Society, as we begin our new historic homes inventory. This having them participate with that would give us additional resources, give them the opportunity to become much more intimately familiar with the historic resources that we have around the city, and do that at the time while other opportunities for using the DLC could be developed. Now, this is a suggestion. We offer it not as a demand, but just in keeping with the idea that we want to be positive and come up with positive suggestions rather than just be negative and say, no, don't do this. So I hope that the society hopes that you keep the DLC for those reasons, and we look forward to having any questions, comments, and discussions about that you might have. That's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Bennett? Okay, thank you very much. All right, you didn't take anywhere near 10 minutes?
No, I didn't.
Mr. Hemer is not identified as representing a group, so I will be limiting him to 3 minutes.
See, Mayor Beatty always starts the timer before I sit down,
no,
so.
That's because it's starting on 10.
Okay, I'll start now.
Go ahead. Here we go.
Mayor Beatty, City Council, and City Manager. My name is Greg Hemer at 5822 Southeast Harrison Street in Milwaukie. I want to express my joy and adulation for the Planning Commission decision about the DLC. They thoroughly reviewed the evidence and expressed the concerns that are worthy noting. I am sure you all watched the PC meeting on July 25th, but the most important note was made by the city attorney. Without the DLC, the PC would be unable legally to negotiate design changes, creating a more robust built environment. In other words, the DLC stands as a conduit to create a better looking building, a more appealing outcome for those that live and view the building, and ensure it fits well into the built environment. Without this conduit, the PC will have to force through variance and justify the reasoning legally instead of making suggestions. Far too often, by the time the PC gets a package, the building is pretty well set in stone, and changes will add costs or inconveniences. Well worthy of an appeal to City Council. The Planning Department uses the excuse that no new projects are on the horizon, but if we retire the DLC tonight and a new project comes in a week, then you have lost that opportunity. And if you want to reinstate the DLC, time, money, and bandwidth, Ms. Over's favorite line, will ensure it never happens again. This is the beauty of the Historical Society plan. Leave the DLC intact. Ask the DLC members if they would like to work on the Historic Home Inventory Project. Same amount of meeting time, about once a month. The project will take 1.5 years to complete, and then, if the city needs to call upon the DLC, it is available for a public meeting. Maybe once every 6 months if you ask the city to meet with the DLC just to check in. It really seems like the best solution the right thing to do and actually the easiest thing to do. Once again, I agree with the July 25th Planning Commission conclusion not to retire the DLC. Thank you.
Wow, you even ended short of your 3 minutes. Nice job. I do have a question for you before anybody else. Does anybody else have a question for him? Wait.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, just, can you repeat that about the planning commission not being able to, what you said about the
Yeah,
planning
so
commission?
what happened during the
Legal
planning
function.
commission is that I believe it was Commissioner Edge at the time asked, well, could we actually sit there and have the same negotiations that the Design and Landmarks Committee has with the builder as the planning commission? And the city attorney's response was no, because you guys are actually in a position of authority, so you can't ask them to do certain things or to negotiate out a deal. It has to be worked out through some sort of variance or some sort of strong arm process. So as we all know, for the public good, right? That's the excuse that we always use, but nobody knows how to use that excuse. That we're going to be stuck with a building that nobody likes the design of. Think about Axle Tree and the beauty of that building. That was all because of the DLC's work. Coho Point is another example, right? That the beauty of that came out because of the DLC's work with that. And without that ability to be able to do that and that negotiation strategy, we're going to end up with the rubber stamp that the city put on. And I will say one more thing. Ms. Weigel said in a planning commission meeting when we were talking about the design standards, she said, well, it's probably not really possible for anybody to just come in with these standard designs without a variance, which then triggers the DLC. So what they say is about this rubber stamp that we're going to build, it's probably not possible anyways.
Thank you.
May I follow up on that? Excuse me. My first question was going to be related to that reference, but it was actually going to be directed to the city attorney who was present in the meeting. And rather than have that requoted and interpreted, I'd rather actually get clarification from the city attorney.
I think that belongs later in the meeting, doesn't it? After, in the response to public testimony.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'd like to hold space for that,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I'll make a note of it.
Absolutely. Mr. Hemer, you were on the DLC before you were on the Planning Commission. Do you remember roughly what years that was?
Let's see. So that was 17 years ago. So that was 2006 to, that was 7 years. So 2006 to 2013? That'd be about right.
Okay. Did you serve, there was a time when the DLC did a historic survey of, not a survey as in identifying new properties, but like a slideshow and a presentation about key historic properties in Milwaukee. You were on when that happened?
That absolutely. In fact, that was one of my first meetings. We went down to the Milwaukee Museum to find photos. And that's how I fell in love with the Milwaukee Museum and the history of Milwaukee as well. And that I learned respect for the city and the history that it has.
So you were not involved with the museum before that?
No.
Wow, I did not know that. Okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted to
And,
kind of
and I was also on there when we were a CLG city, and we did get grants for funding to help reshape Cha-Cha-Cha's building, Things from Another World building, and some other buildings that got some upgrades and some improvements because of the grant funding from CLG.
So that was state funding, SHPO.
That was state funding, and the way that we matched it was it was up to the business to match the funding. It did not require any city funding to actually do that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hemer? All right,
Thank you.
sure. And last person for whom I have a yellow card, Denise McGriff, who's the mayor of Oregon City, but she's here in her capacity as working as being involved with the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Good to see you, Mayor.
give you 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Beatty and councilors. Yes, I'm Denise McGriff, and I am an advisor on the Board of Trustees for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I have been an advisor for the last 10 years. I represent the state of Oregon. There are 3 of us. I'm the only one that lives in the outside Portland metro area. The other person who's an advisor lives in Portland. And then we actually have one emeritus who lives in Ashland, Jackson County. I'm sure you're familiar with George Kramer, noted historian. So those of you that know me know a little bit about my background, but let me just briefly tell you why I'm here. So as an advisor to the trust, I go around to different cities talking to communities and members of the historical societies or their CLGs or their planning staff about how the trust can assist them in fulfilling and advocating for their preservation projects. So as you know, I live in Oregon City, and we are a CLG and have been so since 1980. And the CLG program, I'd say, is one of the best kept secrets, and I hope that you are one, and that if you aren't, you should be one, because it's very beneficial. It's very helpful to staff. It pays for partial staff time along with the project. And knowing what I know about Milwaukie, not only am I here as a member of the trust, but I'm also a member of the Clackamas County Heritage Council. I'm a member of other numerous historic preservation organizations in Clackamas County, too numerous to mention. Let's just say I probably am a member of just about everything, because I really believe in preservation. I currently serve as the vice president of the Mark Prairie Historical Society down in Canby. We had a building that had a disaster occur in February of last year when the 2 trees fell on it, and we've been working on the restoration of it. So you're asking me, why preservation is important. Our theme for the trust is This Place Matters. And the reason that we use that moniker is that this place matters to what matters to you, and to you, and to you, and to you, and also what matters to me. But it's mostly about what matters to where you are. The trust for the last 10 years has been working diligently with the National Park Service to make sure that the unheard voices of our history are now being brought to the forefront. And that includes LGBTQ+, African Americans, Native Americans, the full range of people of color, and including marginalized communities. It has done so by doing things such as creating the African American Resource Fund. And so I was thinking the other day, I'm assuming you know where the Milwaukie Bakery was. I don't know what's in that building right now. I know it was on Main Street. That is one of those properties that could apply for this type of funding to preserve African American history. A number of businesses and churches in the city of Portland have received funding through this fund. There's also staff time available. Also, the trust has been very active in Clackamas County in trying to pursue the locks, making sure that the locks get reopened, and the history that goes with that. They've also been active in Oregon in terms of Veterans Memorial Coliseum. I will say both of those have been projects that I assigned myself to as an advisor. I'm happy to tell you that just recently I was appointed by the governor to be on the Willamette Falls Locks Authority, so I will be able to bring my expertise from 10 years of working on reopening the locks to that board. I actually have only had 1 meeting with them so far. But I think you have an opportunity here in Milwaukie to make a statement to your community that history is important, that preservation is important. And I'm wearing my little button that says economic development and jobs equals preservation, and it does. Your downtown is a classic example of that. While not everything down there may be designated, it may be eligible, but you have done remarkable things in bringing back the flavor of the downtown. That can only really happen through preservation. I know that as a former staff person myself, managing a historic preservation program in many cities, including Oregon City, that your staff has got a big load of stuff they have to do. I know that your inventory hasn't been updated for quite a while, and it's something I've talked to Shippo about, the different cities in the state. I said, what can you do to help facilitate getting that information updated? Because now you're into mid-century modern. You have one of the foremost experts in preservation living in your town, and I hope Val doesn't kill me for throwing his name out, Val Ballstrom. He happens to be the education manager of an organization that I happen to be the president of the board of. And Val is a resource. I've read the book that was done by the Milwaukie Historical Society about Milwaukie. It's fantastic. I keep thinking, what more can be done? I think you have an opportunity to go back, do a little reset. Staff's recommendation, I read it. I totally get where they're coming from, having been a former staff person. but I think you have an opportunity to work with people like Greg and Steve to say what would be an opportunity that the DLC can do work and should do work in Milwaukie. What about all the unsung and unwritten histories that are out there that the Milwaukie Museum may not know about? What about all the people that they can be talking to? Very little staff time will be involved in that. I think the idea that the Milwaukie Historical Society has in updating your inventory, don't forget about the commercial and industrial buildings. Don't only do just the houses. But again, 50 years is now moving further and further, and I know that Milwaukie has, like I said, an excellent example of mid-century modern that really should be looked at and make sure that they're available in terms of, their exteriors, but, let people do what they need to do to live in them. I think that any expertise that the trust might be able to offer the city of Milwaukie or the Milwaukie Historical Society is available. I'm available to contact our staff and put them in touch with people that can provide some expertise at no cost, mind you. So resources are out there. Staff is overwhelmed, but resources are there. SHPO, their staff, Curry, and all the other staff who work in the CLG program, and Chrissy Curran is available. Matter of fact, she is, I won't give out her hiding place, but she's in Clackamas County quite often. And I think that she would be willing to provide some expertise. So I really urge you to do a reset, take a look at the proposals that your community is asking, and try to work out a compromise so that you can keep your DLC, because I think it's important. I think it sends a message. I did not know before I moved to Oregon City that Seth and Henderson Llewellyn basically created the variety of Bing Cherry, and they named it after the foreman, who happens to be Asian American. That needs to be monumented. That needs to be noted, because I don't think everybody knows that. When I whip out these facts to people, they look at me like, oh gosh, there she goes again. She's telling people about all these little tidbits that she knows about Clackamas County and its history. But I think those places are important. They're important to the history. It's not all about just the settlers that came here, but what about everybody else that was here? And we know that they were here. We know that people of color were here. That's a history that can be unfolded. And, you've got people like Greg and Steve and some of the other volunteers at the museum. You've got SHPO, you've got the National Trust. You have a lot of people in your corner to help you get to the finish line and then set a new goal for the next finish line. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you and talk to you about the trust and support your community. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mayor McGriff?
And I'm just here as Denise McGriff today.
Okay.
Mayor Beatty. So I am not
Any
here with my
questions?
city. This
Yes.
has nothing to do with Oregon City. That happens to be another hat that I wear.
Fair enough.
Tonight is
Fair
my
enough.
National Trust hat.
Yeah.
I just have one question, and thank you for coming and sharing your expertise. The CLG, if I understand it correctly, only has to have a commission that meets 4 times a year. Is that
It doesn't
correct?
really specify that you have to meet. I honestly, my experience is that no jurisdiction that I've ever worked for in my 30-year career has had a landmarks board or a historic review board, except Clackamas County. I will say that they're struggling right now, and I've actually applied for one of the vacancies. I used to be on it, and I got off of it, but I was asked by the commissioners to reapply. They meet regularly. Our historic review board meets monthly. They have been doing work on the, how do I say this nicely? So the work that has come out of House Bill 2001. So they are reviewing our design guidelines for historic preservation against the state statute and figuring out how we can make that work. So, that has been a lot of work. They've been working on that for about the last 6 months in sort of concert with our planning commission. So we've got one path going down the road with historic preservation and our design guideline standards, and we've got the planning commission looking at it from this standpoint, and they will intersect at some point in time in the process. And so I've been very interested in how they are looking at the standards that are required under that state law, because it does apply. It applies to everything, as you know, and there's some other bills that we won't talk about right now because I'll just get all upset and cranky about it, that are talking about taking away things that we deal with in terms of that livability. So the CLG can provide some help and guidance with that through that process, and we've actually asked some of the staff to help us a little bit through that, looking at the middle housing quotients that we have and quotas that we have to meet. And like I said, our Historic Review Board has been very active in reviewing that and anything that has to do with housing. Primarily, as you know, in Oregon City, most of our districts are housing. So we've got issues of ADUs, we've got issues dealing with, lot divisions, and you're going to have how many houses on one lot. How does that fit into the development pattern of the neighborhood? How does that meet our design guidelines, and how can we help make middle housing a reality without compromising our historic districts?
That's helpful context, especially hearing how another city is handling it. I feel like the input process and the conversation in Milwaukie around the other issues that you had mentioned has been very robust. But I guess what I'm specifically wondering about is a designation of Milwaukie as a CLG. What would be the base requirement for something like a DLC to meet?
Well, you should have already met the base requirements with the approval of your comprehensive plan, and then if you've gone through periodic review or updates over the years, you had to meet Goal 5, so you had to have some basic inventory. And staff, please jump in if I'm mischaracterizing something. As I recall, you have to have an ordinance, and you have to have the ordinance set up, some sort of group that is dealing with those specific issues.
Okay.
And also, like I said, meeting the comp plan is, I believe Greg brought up as well. You've already kind of done all that.
Okay.
But, as many of us have done over the last probably 5 years or so, we just updated our comp plan. So we now have a 2040 comp plan, and one of the sections in that dealt with our historic districts and our properties. So we updated that along with everything else we were doing, and all the other work with middle housing and everything else the state is piling on to us.
Okay. Well, and since the
So you got-
DLC
you
reports,
built most of the basic requirements
Yeah.
up right now.
okay, so that's great. And since the DLC advises, the Planning Commission, then I think the Planning Commission meeting would suffice. So thank you.
Most of the jurisdictions that I work with don't quite operate that way. They don't work through the Planning Commission because depending on the jurisdiction, the expertise that they need on either the DLC type group or the Historic Review Board is, it's fairly broad, although they all have some expertise in dealing with historic properties, or at least their backgrounds, architecture or archaeology or landscape. And then we have a couple of at-large positions in our
Okay.
in our city, because we have one person who represents the McLaughlin Conservation District and one person who represents the Kenema Historic District. So those are the two people that don't necessarily are experts, but they live there and they're have those homes that they're representing those folks.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarification? When Councilor Savage first asked you about how frequently they had to meet, you started to say a
don't
lot
think
of them
there's-
don't meet that frequently.
I
You
don't
got
know.
off on one
Yeah.
that meets
I don't
every
know whether-
month.
I
but-
don't know if there's a requirement. I don't recall that there's a requirement in the CLG statute.
Are you
there
looking
that
at what
you're
I'm
aware of?
looking at? It's 4.
Well, they'll get to come up
Yeah,
and.
I've never seen that. And like I said, I've worked for several jurisdictions every jurisdiction I've worked for has a CLG.
Yeah.
And there was, not that I recall there's a requirement, you have to meet once a month, twice a month.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And I just pulled up the CLG requirements. I'm not sure if I brought that up here with me, but I have it at my seat, and I didn't see anything in there about that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Ms. McGriff?
The application checklist.
Well, I wanted to ask you, our inventory was done in '89, as I understand it. So in '89,
Stuff-
mid-century houses were not 50 years old, and so they could not be recognized.
They can now.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify. So, a lot has happened in 34 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
a lot
stuff-
has been built, a lot has aged, a lot has.
Yeah, in Milwaukee, I went on a mid-century modern tour about 2-3 years ago, and I was just astounded at the number of excellent examples that you have of mid-century modern. It's not my favorite style, but I appreciate it. I'm more into the 1900s to 1930s styles, but that's just me personally, and I live in a house style that's similar to yours.
All right, if no other questions, we'll thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and I'd be happy to have offline conversations. I love talking about preservation, of course.
Thank you. That's the end of my yellow cards. Mr. Stoffer, still nobody online and nobody emailing you?
That's correct, Mayor Beatty. There's no emails and nobody online.
Okay, great. So, does staff have any response to the testimony? So we have identified one issue for the attorney to perhaps clarify.
Can go ahead and chime in while they settle themselves in the driving seat, passenger seat, however you guys want to do it. My recollection of Commissioner Edge's question was whether or not it would be appropriate for the Planning Commission to have a pre-application meeting with an applicant, and as a quasi-judicial decision maker, that would not be appropriate. But I feel it's only fair to put that in the context of the recent code amendments that we've done for the DLC code. We've adopted, and for those of you without Planning Commission experience, we've adopted what we call clear and objective criteria, which is substantially different from what the code previously was. And this was kind of the large process that Brett worked on with the DLC, and I invite staff to chime in if I misstate anything. And so that DLC process had the potential to result in conversations about meeting non-clear and objective criteria. The ability to waiver now from the criteria is you can meet the clear and objective criteria, or you can apply for a variance from it, and that can sit in front of the Planning Commission. The DLC would be reviewing the application in a pre-application meeting setting, I guess, looking at the exact same code that the Planning Commission would then apply. I'm not sure how that changes things, but I think it's important to put that context out there, that there's not a significant amount of wiggle room there when we look at clear and objective criteria compared to what we previously had. Another point came to mind, and I think staff can confirm this, but I think in the past, I think I heard Laura say that the DLC has reviewed or had those types of meetings with 10 different applications over the life of the DLC. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that those have resulted in any substantive changes to the building as it was proposed. Certainly there was some back and forth, but they're more knowledgeable about it than I am. But I don't know if that clarifies for you.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And I always like to give someone, especially if they're in the room, the opportunity to respond if they've been quoted. So, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Other response to the testimony?
Well, on that note, Counselor Savoyard, I'm not sure that Mr. Hemer did quote me as saying that development would not be able to go through the process without getting a variance, and that is not correct. So I don't recall if I said those exact words, but I'm saying now that is not correct. We have clear and objective standards, and we have good code that allows developments to go through our code without going through a variance process. In fact, we're required by law to do so. So that's one thing. And I just also want to say that yes, I agree that we could have CLG status now. I don't think that we are precluded from that in the SHPO requirements. In other jurisdictions that I've worked in, we have had CLG status. I will also say that in other jurisdictions that I've worked in, it's been a real struggle because, again, without a work program and without work right immediately in front of us, staff is continually having to create something for the group to work on. And we know that we're going to update the historic resources inventory. We have plans to do that down the road. So at that time, I think that if we decided that we wanted to have the group come back together, or whatever that group might look like, it might look differently than the DLC looks today. We may decide in the future that we don't need a downtown design review group looking at downtown design review because we have code now that's getting us what we want. And it's so infrequent. I mean, that's another thing that I think that's important, that convening this group so infrequently does not create a consistent volunteer group that's working on a specific project that they can really be involved in. So not saying that we won't do that in the future. I'm just not sure that now is the moment to do that with all of our other competing things that we want to do. I do think, right now we have, when we did the original inventory in 1989, 130 properties were identified in the city. 90 of those properties came off of that list, most of them based on folks not wanting to be on the list because there are requirements that go with being a significant resource that's protected by the city. So right now, we've only got 16 properties on that list. I do agree that in, times it's been a long time since we did it. It is time to do it again in the near future. It'll just be interesting to see how many of those properties actually end up being a significant resource on that list and get code protection. All of that said, I do believe in protecting our historic resources 100%. I find them very valuable. In particular, we are in this building right here, and I'm so thrilled that we're getting to have an adaptive reuse for this building, which we are also allowed to do as part of our code. And so I think it's really finding those buildings that really speak to the community and are a part of our community culture and doing everything that we can protect those in the future. That's what's driving it. And I do hope to have that larger conversation down the road. I'm just not sure we're in that point right now.
Okay. All right. Does council have any questions for staff? Okay, if there are no more questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public comment part of the hearing.
I move to close the public comment part of the DLC code change hearing.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public comment part of the DLC code change hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The public comment part of the DLC code change hearing is closed. Is there any council discussion? You're welcome to start, but you've had to start every time tonight, so we can start elsewhere if you prefer to.
No, it's okay. I can start. So it's definitely a lot to think about, and I appreciate not only the staff report, multiple conversations with council, but also the number of community members who have been here tonight and who have emailed in. It's always really helpful to hear, especially on issues like this where we're hearing, multiple recommendations. So I think what it comes down to for me is when you're a part of a volunteer board or commission, you sign up because there's something for you to do. At least that's why I sign up for volunteer gigs. If there's not a consistent body of work for the DLC to be working on, then we do start to see atrophied membership or commitment. That doesn't mean that history is not important. It doesn't mean that preservation doesn't matter. And I think that if we were in a position where there was concern about that being left out of other conversations and processes that exist in the city's work or other initiatives, then this would be an even more difficult conversation to have tonight. I did have some thoughts and questions about, what Councilor Khosrowbadi brought up in our last discussion around the CLG status and what opportunities might be available to us. But I feel like that has been sufficiently answered, and I don't feel like those opportunities we'll be missing out on because we would be able to apply for that status and access those funds. So, I think the only question that really remains for me is, what sort of value is in place for DLC members? And I think that if we look at an ad hoc committee meeting that either comes up as needed or a couple of times a year, then there might be still meaning for the participants. The challenge with that is that then you have to maintain the involvement, and over time I think that the membership atrophies. So that's where I'm at with the struggle of the decision tonight is really how we create a space where we have meaningful involvement that informs an important process and also allows community members to feel like their involvement matters in meetings, and what that needs to be structured to look like.
Want to go next?
Yeah. Just to touch on what you mentioned about being able to have that. I mean, we can't apply for any of these grants without that sort of a board or commission. You know, you got Diamonds in the Rough grant, Historic Cemetery grant, Oregon Heritage grant, Oregon Museum grant, Oregon Main Street Revitalization grant. We'll lose out on a lot of that stuff. So we've never even, I think, attempted as a city or as an organization to go after these things. So the way I look at it is, right now, the only ones that are asking to shut this thing down is staff. The public's not coming to testify against DLC. Even another board and commission in the planning commission is voted to keep the DLC. And then we also had testimony from local constituents on keeping it open as well. Not to discredit staff at all. I understand that staff is stretched thin, but unfortunately, I mean, that logic can be applied to everything we do right now. This is just where we're at. And outside of the goals, the 3 goals we have, there's still functions and there's still things that the city needs to maintain and keep. And I just don't think that getting rid of the DLC, they've done 10 things in how many years, but maybe it's because the focus of the DLC has been on just that particular topic. If we change the focus, then it might get more people involved. It might get more people to want to join the DLC. If we say, hey, the DLC is now focusing on local grants, local opportunities for local businesses and things like that, we might get more people involved in that. I mean, First Friday, look what happened to that event. The community took that over and it's back, right? I think the key would be to maybe alter the focus. And we're talking about a time frame of about 1 year and 4 months if 2025 is the target, right? That's what it said in the staff report, 2025, looking back and maybe bringing it back. Hopeful target. So I just look at it like maybe we're not seeing those opportunities for them because we've been so focused on what they've been doing, right? Maybe it's just time to alter what their role is to meet what we need them to do. I mean, I'm just looking at all this. I mean, there's a lot of, and regardless of the size of economic development, we're not doing very much economic development. Like, it's not a goal, right? So I just don't feel like we should get rid of anything that could potentially provide economic development, because it's only going to help the small business owners. It's only going to help the people, the tenants in those buildings. It's only going to help our city as a whole. And I just feel like it's to look at their workload and say that that's, you know, their workload hasn't been that much. Well, that's all they've been tasked with. If we can possibly task them with more, then maybe there'll be more buy-in in terms of people being a part of that board or commission. And I was on the planning commission, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours. And to assume that the planning commission can be the quote-unquote de facto DLC, I mean, they voted no. Planning commission voted to keep the DLC. So that, we should take that into consideration as well. These are volunteers. These are all people of Milwaukie who put in the time, who spend hours on code, on variances, on development. And you know, I would think that if they saw it within themselves to get rid of it, then I think it might have a little bit more weight. But, you know, there's been no public interest in getting rid of it. It's been just strictly staff interest. So I just want to keep that in mind as well. Again, not discrediting staff at all, but it's not like, you know, there's a line of people saying, hey, the DLC's got to go because they're not doing anything. It's specifically staff, because I understand the workload, but this is just the time that we're in. This is just where we're at. And, you know, I just feel like if we just change it, even if they had to meet 4 times a year, right? That's, what, once every quarter? That's not too much to ask, I don't think. And if they're focusing on something different, I mean, Denise McGriff gave a lot of examples of what our DLC could be doing. And if we don't think that's valuable enough, then what do we consider valuable in that context? Because I think she listed off a number of things that the DLC could be doing that could benefit. I mean, we are doing some economic development, like we are doing Main Street enhancements, right? But those aren't even enhancements. Those are putting in things that we're required to have, like the ADA ramps and stuff. I mean, these are other things that we could be pursuing since we're not doing economic development as a goal, even though every counselor up here has stated that it's important. Why would we take away another avenue that could potentially help in that line of work?
Thank you. Counselor Massey?
Well, I take a sort of a different view of what the community might think is important. And I look back to all of the work that has gone in over the past few years of the visioning process, the comprehensive plan, the code amendments. And I think that the planning staff is outlined in the planning manager's presentation about the priorities. I think those came to the top of the public's interest. And, I don't think anyone is against historic preservation, but I think what I'm hearing from the staff is, a help. I kind of fall back to if everything's a priority, then nothing's really a priority. And so I think that sometimes you just have to make tough decisions. And I don't think that the staff is going to turn their back on historic preservation or anything like that. But my point is that, I think the larger, community has spoken about what the priorities are, and I think that, the city staff is working on that. And so I want to let them, do that heavy lifting on those projects.
Council President?
I agree with what everybody has said up here tonight. Staff has made really clear justifications on the DLC. Like Councilor Massey said, it's not like they don't want to work on historic preservation, but when we're talking workload, is there enough workload? Is the time, are people's time being used efficiently? It's not. I don't want to sit here and just blather on about why or why not. I would hope that we could find a way to do ad hoc at some point, because I think that would be beneficial, because there are folks who are willing to do this work. Is there a way we can do that? Maybe. I don't know. I just think that we should move on and like you said, tough decisions, and there are tough decisions to make tonight. So that's it.
Okay. So I will be voting to deny this, and I will be for a variety of reasons. I was frankly a little surprised that the Planning Commission came out with the recommendation to deny, but I think they articulated some excellent reasons. They weren't all the same reasons. They all kind of had slightly different reasons, but I want to support the Planning Commission's vote on this. That's first. Second, we are embarrassingly behind on protecting our historic resources. It's that our inventory is 34 years old, and that none of the mid-century houses in this town were even eligible for protection back at the last time we looked at our inventory is something we should be embarrassed about. And I was on the comp plan committee, and And it was clear to us, it was clear when we came out of that process that we had to do middle housing first, and we really needed to do TSP. And I don't disagree with those prioritizations. But I will say, in the last 15 years, I served on either the Planning Commission or the Council throughout the last 15 years with about a 6-month gap in between. We have enacted code on habitat conservation areas and environmental protections. We have enacted new code on Willamette Greenway. In my view, those things need to take a back seat. Anything we need to do on those, they may be important, but they need to take a back seat to historic preservation. We need to get we need to have the conversation. I agree with Laura. It's a big conversation. We need to talk about, what the scope is and what we want to recognize, and also what protections, what limitations. I mean, the whole thing about people opting out back in 1989, I think may look different today, but it's all about what the code is, how you're going to restrict things. But that we don't even have a good inventory identifying places that need protection, that we have this 16 property list of significant, and then another 25 or so of contributing properties. I mean, I find it an embarrassment, frankly. I will also say that when former Planning Commissioner Hemer mentioned his own tenure and how they worked on historic preservation in the late 2000s, how they worked on not doing a new inventory, but doing a sort of public education piece. I remember there was a very lovely slideshow available on the city's website. I remember trying to look for it again a couple years ago and I couldn't find it, but it was something that was done by the DLC in the late 2000s. So I think it's an example of public education and public outreach function that a DLC could be fulfilling, even if they don't have applications to review. I think quarterly meetings is a fine idea. If there's not applications to review, there's, either that kind of public awareness, public outreach, or helping with the inventory that the museum's doing, consulting, just being consultants to the museum. The museum has a lot of people interested, but not necessarily people that have all the skills that some of the people on the DLC have. There is a historic preservation, expert on the DLC. There are a couple of architects on the DLC. It's interesting to me, I've been thinking about this, like when I was watching the hearing and the Planning Commission hearing and reading the package. It's interesting to me that we haven't heard from the DLC. Either way, we really got nothing to do, you should, but I guess they're in kind of a awkward position. They can't really, it'd be awkward for them to come out against staff. So yeah, I guess there's not too much to be read into the fact that we haven't heard from them, but I kind of would have liked to have heard from them. As for apart from their historic preservation, their design review, no new projects on the horizon, we've got a lot. I think I think we will see the demolition of the building next to our new city hall. Other things will be coming in the coming years, and I do think we don't have the protections we need to have, or we haven't had the inventory that we need to do. So I will definitely be voting to deny this. I just think, and we are supposed to have a conversation this fall, I believe, about prioritizing the projects after the TSP. So we'll see where that conversation takes us.
I think that's in November.
November?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Is it really? It's so soon. It's next month.
It's next month, okay. So anyway, that's where I stand. Anybody else wanna?
I just wanted, just to push back a little bit on the priority part. Nobody's making the DLC a priority. This was something that staff brought to our attention, not the public. The community's interest wasn't to dissolve the DLC.
No, I agree, but the priority thing was about how far out it is.
Right.
So I will say, when we did the comp plan in 2020, we were talking about 2024. And then when we were starting the TSP work a year ago, it was like, okay, this is slipping to 2025.
Oh, I was referring
And
to
now-
Councilor Matthew.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Council President when they were talking about the priorities of the
Oh,
the
yeah,
public
I
and
don't know
community.
where Councilor Massey thinks the community weighed in on the priorities, but I don't recall that
I
happening.
mean, we were the ones that picked the goals. I mean, the community priority was affordability, but we didn't pick that. So if we're referring to the goals as what the community wants, I mean, we unilaterally made that decision. And this isn't like a priority that's being, I don't feel like this is a priority. If staff didn't feel like there was no point of the DLC being up here, we wouldn't even be talking about it. But the fact that there's no public response to dissolve the DLC makes me, and the Planning Commission, who's made up of the public, voted against it, that makes me think that there's really no energy behind dissolving it.
If I could just make a clarification, the work program, not the council goals, the work program that we've got the priorities outlined that I've showed to city council every single year since I've been here since 2020. We've been having that conversation ongoing since I got here. And so that has always been the order of things. Historic
Right.
resources was lower on the order
But
of
that's what I'm
things.
saying. This isn't, I think we're stuck on the historical part of it. And I think that's it doesn't have to be specifically like historical. There's so much in here that they can be going towards. And yes, this has to do with more historical, but for example, the Oregon Main Street Network, right? We're not even a part of that. And that gives you grants to revitalize your downtown. That's stuff that they could be working on, is all I'm saying. Instead of just saying, hey, they're historical, let's get rid of it, why don't we say, hey, they're historical, but they also serve another purpose that could be for economic development, which again, we all said was important, but we didn't make a goal, right? So why not, if we have the DLC already formed, why not just task them, give them a task, change their task, instead of just saying, well, what they were established for is no longer relevant for what we need, at least for the next year and a half or so. Instead of doing that, we can task them with something else. And a lot of this has to do with time that staff has to put these meetings together. It doesn't have to do with anything other than, it doesn't have to do anything with it does have to do with people not being in that commission, but I think that stems from them not having a lot of tasks, right? So I just feel like we're going to leave a lot on the table that could benefit this community that we're not currently focused on because of time, money, and bandwidth. So if we have a commission already in place that could potentially focus on this stuff, that's a lift that they could be doing for the city and for the community that could pay dividends. And let's be honest, has any of us up here looked into SHPO or any of the grants since the last time we had the discussion? I didn't. I just started looking at it now. So we haven't even put really the work or thought into what exactly could be the DLC's new task and what benefits we can gather. I would love to sit down with Denise McGriff and talk about everything that she just said in more detail. So, I just feel like there's more that can be done as opposed to just saying, well, they're not doing anything, they haven't done anything in the last few years, let's just get rid of them. Let's give them a new task.
Councilor Stevens-Jordan?
So I did look into the Certified Local Government Program, and on their application, there are specifics that any jurisdiction would need to go through to apply for that designation. I do not believe that the DLC needs to exist for Milwaukie to apply, get the designation, and be able to bring money in.
It does for other grants. You're looking at CLG. You have to look at the other
That's
grants.
the
and stuff.
program that was referenced today. So
Right.
you're
but-
talking about grants in general?
No, I'm looking at, but that's the thing. If you become a CLG, if you read what these grants require, they require some sort of landmark design and landmarks committee or some historical society, something like that, to be able to do that.
And I believe that if we came to a compromise of meeting with an ad hoc DLC status, that would meet that requirement. If we're not able to get to that, if it's either dissolve it or keep it, then I believe we have a divided council. But I'm hoping that we're able to get to a point where we can say that we would dissolve the standing committee function of the DLC, and that it would exist as an ad hoc committee. And it's great that there's renewed interest and we want to have conversation about the potential and the future scope of this, but I believe that what we're getting is a clear message about capacity from our staffing team. And as we are excited about various issues, and the community is excited about various issues, we still have a finite amount of staffing. So, and full disclosure, my day job is a staff person. If I am staffing a committee that doesn't have a lot to do, has a hard time getting members to show up for meetings, and I'm struggling as a staff person to find that rejuvenating energy for that group, while also competing with major planning issues that have been dictated on my workload, then I would be making a similar recommendation. And I respect that they have done that. I also respect that the community, a sector of the community has countered that. I'm not saying that their voices are not important. I'm saying that I believe that we can find a space in the middle in an ad hoc capacity.
And this is no offense to staff, but a lot of the issues when we come up with is the same thing, is time, money, bandwidth, but we still do the things. I mean, if we're going to take that approach to DLC, then we should take that approach to other things that we ask staff to do.
Well, like we
And
did
maybe we should.
disband our CUAB, I think disbanding one committee a year is probably enough. I was a little
where we're at.
concerned last night with what I heard about how we're, what we're doing with the CUAB functions, so, yeah, that's another reason.
This could potentially, I just feel like it could potentially hurt the community because we're going to lose out on some, and I get what you're saying, the ad hoc thing, that's why I'm saying if we change their task and then you go to a quarterly meeting.
But it's not changing the task. It's fine to have a larger conversation about the body of work that might be addressed by the DLC. I'm not proposing that at this point. I'm proposing a change to the standing function of the committee. So moving it from a standing committee, which requires a monthly allocation of staff time and the development and the maintenance of a committee, to something that is an ad hoc nature, that it just changes the frequency when that group comes together.
I think
Why
I could
does a
clarify.
standing committee require monthly? I mean, maybe our bylaws say that's something we could amend, but I mean, a standing committee could be quarterly, could be semi-annual, doesn't have to be monthly.
Sure, let me say this one last piece. If the standing committee says that, we're going to meet in September and that's the committee meeting, but something really important is actually coming in October, as a committee member, I would much rather be called when I'm needed rather than come to just a set standing quarterly meeting. That's my personal preference.
Can I just have council members come to, where they are on this? Can we just can we ask for a vote?
Well, Laura made it all the way up here, so.
Sorry, Councilor Nicodemus. I just want to say that right now, the DLC is basically functioning as a standing committee, because we are not meeting with them monthly.
You mean as an ad hoc?
As an ad hoc, as an ad hoc committee, because we have not met with them since August. So, and
This
And
is August, since last August?
Last August,
Okay.
right. Oh, actually, we've met with them once, I take that back. We've met with them once in the last year, and that was to review a historic resources application. If we wanted CLG status, and there's a question as to whether or not we want CLG status, and what is the point of CLG status if we're not actually going to do work around historic resources at this time, that would be later. That said, even if we didn't want CLG status, we could keep the DLC as an ad hoc committee, just as we've been doing. We call upon them to review applications once or twice a year when they come in. And then when we get to the historic resource work, whenever that may be, and for clarification, it's not going to be in 2025. I know originally we had talked about that, and the reason it's in the staff report is because I'm trying to be consistent in what I've told you all, but at the same time, we're gonna have a whole conversation about our work plan, because the work plan there's been a lot of stuff that's come down from the state. The transportation system plan has taken a while. Things are just taking much longer based on other workloads. So we're not gonna get to the historic resources conversation in a couple of years, unless at our conversation we reorganize the work plan. But that is a conversation for another meeting.
And I'm really sorry, but can you speak into the mic?
Oh, I always
Thank
do
you.
that. I'm sorry. So we could keep the DLC as an ad hoc committee and keep them in the wings until we do the historic work. They would not be taking on, at least at this moment, any larger role than what they've been doing for the last year. They would not be developing economic development programs in the current work program, and I'm not sure that they are the correct the group to be doing that, because it's specific to historic resources. Economic development is a different bear, not just about historic resources. So that is it can be an ad hoc committee if that is the way that this city council wants to go. It will just lie dormant most of each year, and we'll have issues keeping people on the board, and we will have to tell them that we don't have work for them and that they will be called upon once or twice a year possibly to weigh in on applications.
And just to clarify, I wasn't talking about the DLC becoming an economic development, but these grants, that's what the grants do on their own. It's for those businesses, for those main street.
For historic resources,
That's part of it's more than just that. There's a lot, like the Oregon Main Street Network is not just about historical, you know what I'm saying? So it's more than just that. It's all within the same umbrella. That was the point. I mean, not saying that they would take on economic development on their own as the sole, but there's economic development opportunities through this that they could then approach.
Well, when we did do a storefront improvement program, and that was not through the Main Street program. That was actually part of a transit-oriented development program grant that was given to us through Metro. It wasn't part of the historic Main Street program.
And this is not to say one way or the other. I just want to make sure that you also know the CET program and the URA funds are actually doing a lot of the same services that you're talking about in the grants that we're talking about tonight. So we've talked about doing this economic development programming. We talked about it at the budget committee yesterday to help with things like tenant improvements, storefront improvements. They're the same service. They're for more people in those downtown cores. Just letting you know, we're going to be letting those out hopefully sometime this winter. Thanks.
The more the merrier.
Council President?
So I have some clarifying question. So if we do ad hoc, then we're not voting on dissolving the DLC tonight.
You would. Sorry.
It's all right. And if it's ad hoc, it's not going to add more staff time for you.
It will not add more staff time for us as long as it's ad hoc and it's just for the downtown design review and historic resource application review.
Okay. And then my first question.
You would vote to deny the proposed changes. We would keep the code as is. We don't need to change the bylaws. We don't need to do anything in the code to continue on an ad hoc basis.
Okay.
Sorry, just out of curiosity, how much staff time has the DLC taken in the last year?
In the last year, it's taken a lot of staff time.
Well, besides, This was brought up
trying to
by
understand
staff.
what it has taken up in the last year is trying to understand what the DLC is going to be doing for the next 5 years or the next 3 years. We don't know what that is besides the historic resources review. So we needed to understand as staff what we're doing with this board, with this committee, because as it is, we've just been kind of saying, hey, we're on hold. We don't know what we're doing because historic resource inventory isn't slated to begin for many years from now. So we have been discussing internally because we do value our boards and committees and we want people to get the most out of them, right? And so we've been struggling to understand what it is that they were going to do. And when we came to the realization that there wasn't anything for them to really do over the next several years, that's why we brought this conversation to you.
Councilor Massey?
You just said that, there would be no additional workload for staff by maintaining the DLC. Is that what I heard you say?
By maintaining it in its current state.
Okay, in its current state. But there's also no reduction in staff to work on your work program.
We still have the rest of the work program to work on, yes.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have resources to allocate to the work plan that the city council has nodded that those are the priorities for the planning commission.
We could handle the ad hoc meetings.
Okay.
But not the work associated with grants.
Not the
setting up
work
a foundation.
associated with anything but reviewing downtown design review applications and historic resource applications. No other work. If we wanted the committee to do other work, then there would be staff impacts, and we'd have to talk about what other work we want them to do and being very clear and developing a full-blown work program for what the DLC would do. We do not have that at the moment. So that would require extra staff work.
Council President?
So, do we need to do anything to make it so it's exactly what you just said, that it's just they're reviewing, no staff time for you all?
No, you do not need to do anything tonight. I guess the only caveat to that would be when we have our work plan discussion, that there's an understanding that if you add more to the DLC, if you decide that you want to change the order of things, then that will change the order of things and what gets prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, it does seem to me this is a little bit of cart before the horse. Like, we should be having this conversation after we have that conversation.
We're trying to figure out how to have all the conversations here, baby. It's so complicated.
Okay. Other points? Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
All right. So, we closed the public comment portion. Okay. I would entertain a motion.
Well, hold on, before you do that though, this is to retire the DLC.
Yes.
Right?
So
So this isn't to ad hoc it, this is to,
this is to retire it. So you're going to vote, if you're wanting to ad hoc it, you're going to vote no on this. If you're wanting to retire it, you're going to vote yes. Correct? Okay. Got it. So I will entertain a motion.
I move for the first and second? I move for the first and second readings by title only and the adoption of the ordinance amending various parts of the municipal code MMC as necessary to formally retire the Design and Landmarks Committee, DLC, file number ZA-2023-005.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending various parts of the municipal code, MMC, as necessary to formally retire the Design and Landmarks Committee, DLC, file number ZA-2023-005. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, was that two?
Yeah.
Okay. All those opposed say no?
no.
No? Okay, I'm not sure I heard all the, so,
Did you vote?
did you vote aye or no?
Aye.
You voted aye, okay. So, it looks like it passed, to retire the commission and not continue in ad hoc. So, Ms. Ober, can you read the, ordinance 2 times by title only?
I want to confirm, I believe I read it once, and I believe this has to be a second
Oh,
vote at
yes,
the next
you're
meeting
right.
because it was not unanimous.
right.
Okay.
All right.
So, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukee, Oregon, amending municipal code title. I'm sorry, I have to start again. I wrote the wrong section. An ordinance of the City of Milwaukee, Oregon, amending various parts of the municipal code MMC is necessary to formally retire the Design and Landmarks Committee DLC file number ZA 2023-005. Thank you.
And Mr. Stoffer, would you please poll the council?
The polling will happen at the conclusion of the second reading.
Oh, okay,
Um,
okay.
The second reading and adoption will be set for September 5th, 2023, so the next regular session meeting.
Okay,
And that's when the polling will happen.
okay. Okay, great. Thank you for cleaning that up. Okay. And we did council reports, unless any counselors have any last reports they didn't remember. Okay. If that's the case, Ms. Ober, nothing else from you?
I feel like you've heard enough. Thanks.
It's only 8:30. The night is young. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Good night.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. We are adjourned.